The trade that exposed my wife's affair hit the wrong account at 2:17 on a Wednesday, which was how I learned that cheating can look exactly like money when the liar is smart enough to work in finance. I was in the lobby of a converted warehouse in River North, waiting on a developer who was 20 minutes late to see a penthouse he could not really afford, when my phone lit up with a brokerage alert from an account I almost never touched. It was my reserve account, the quiet one, the boring one, the place I parked commission buffers, quarterly tax money, and the kind of cash a real estate broker keeps out of reach so he does not get sentimental and mistake momentum for security. The alert said $43,000 had just been used to buy short-dated call options in a stock I had never once traded. Not only was I not reckless, I was professionally allergic to people who confuse speculation with intelligence. I sold buildings to men like that every quarter. Men who thought the next number would save them from the last one. I stared at the screen, read the trade again, and felt the first cold click of something opening in my head. My wife Beatrice was a stockbroker, 36, sharp as broken glass, beautiful in the polished, expensive way Chicago rewards when beauty arrives in a blazer and carries performance as a second language. We had been together 10 years, married almost all of them, and for most of that time our life had looked like what other people in the city were trying to build. 2 good careers, good coats, better wine, condos that appreciated, busy schedules, no children yet, but the kind of vague future language that let family members stay hopeful and let us postpone harder truths. From the outside, we looked loyal. From the inside, we looked efficient. That is not the same thing. Before I tell you how one wrong trade turned into the end of my marriage, subscribe to Reddit Ride, because stories like this rarely begin with lipstick or motel receipts. Sometimes they begin with an account statement and a husband quiet enough to read all the way to the bottom. I called Beatrice right there in the warehouse lobby. She answered on the second ring, voice low and smooth. "I'm about to step into a client review." "What's up?" "There's an options trade in my reserve account." Half a beat. Then she gave a little laugh I had heard 1,000 times at dinners, rooftop events, and charity things where people wanted to feel reassured by her confidence. "That's probably a platform sync issue," she said. "Those alerts can lag and scramble." Forward it to me later. If I had not known her, that answer might have worked. But I did know her. And the tiny thing that mattered was not the sentence. It was the speed. Beatrice did not ask which account. She did not ask what ticker. She did not ask how much. She moved straight to explanation. That was when suspicion stopped being theoretical. By the time the developer finally arrived, I had already logged in from my phone. The trade was real. $43,000 in same-week call options on a garbage small-cap biotech called Arian Biolabs, a stock that spent most of its life being pumped by men with too much hair product and not enough shame. The order ticket showed it had been placed through the same firm where Beatrice worked, using a household-linked authorization trail that should never have touched my reserve account in the first place. The device fingerprint was not mine. The branch code was hers. I still took the meeting. That was the kind of man I was. I walked a stranger through a beautiful apartment with lake views, while an entirely different view of my life rearranged itself in the background. I talked about ceiling heights, tax posture, and resale timing in the same voice I always used. Quiet men learn early that panic is a tax you pay only if you have no other assets. When I got back to my car, I called the firm's service line and asked for the order details to be sent securely. The woman on the phone gave me the cautious, overtrained tone people in finance use when they think they are protecting you from yourself. "Was the trade placed intentionally, sir?" "That," I said, "is exactly what I'm trying to find out." The report hit my inbox 20 minutes later. The order had been entered manually. Not by a platform glitch. Not by a delayed sync. Manually. There was an internal note attached to it. Reallocate after close if recovery achieved. My wife had not just touched the wrong account. She had planned for the possibility of losing in it. I sat in my car on Wells Street with buses grinding past and office workers moving around me in that sharp weekday rhythm Chicago does better than almost any city in America. And for the first time, I let myself ask the question men try hardest not to ask too early. Who was she doing this for? Because people like Beatrice do not risk clean money for adrenaline. They risk it for loyalty, vanity, or desire. At home that night, she came in at 7:40 wearing charcoal trousers, a cream silk shell, and the expression of a woman who had already decided the room would be manageable. "Long day," she said, tossing her keys into the bowl by the door. North Shore Review ran over. I was opening a bottle of Barbara. I looked up and smiled the way husbands smile when they are still deciding whether to blow their lives up before or after dinner. Mine too. She crossed the kitchen, kissed my cheek, and went to wash her hands. That was the strange thing about the first stage of discovery. You expect hatred to arrive immediately. It does not. What arrives first is double vision. The woman at the sink was still my wife. Same narrow shoulders. Same gold hoop earrings. Same habit of tucking hair behind one ear before she tied it back. But now she was also a risk surface. A person with hidden accounts in her body. I watched her through dinner and said almost nothing. She talked about market nerves. A woman in Winnetka panicking over municipal bonds. Some partner at her firm who was angling for another title. Once she asked if I was all right. "Just tired," I said. She nodded sympathetically, which almost made me laugh. After she showered, I went back through the order report. Then I went through the last 6 months of statements for that account. Something I should have done sooner but had never bothered to because trust is lazy by design. It wants efficiency. It wants delegation. It wants to believe that the person sleeping beside you is not treating your future like a margin buffer. At first there was only the trade. Then there were the transfers. 3 small ones, spaced across 5 months, all labeled as internal liquidity balancing. 8,000, 11,000, 6,000. Each had been reversed within days, as though someone had dipped into the account, then repaid it once another stream of money cleared. I pulled our joint billing records next. The shape of the lie started to show itself almost immediately. Valet charges at a hotel bar in the West Loop Beatrice had never once mentioned. 2 private dining tabs at a members club where I was not a member. A monthly invoice from a luxury car service under a vendor alias. A series of digital transfers to an LLC called Granite Harbor Media, which sounded like exactly what it was. A name chosen by a man who wanted to sound richer than he was. I searched it. The owner was a man named Shane Mercer. That name meant nothing to me until I looked at his photo. Then I actually said out loud to an empty den, "You have got to be kidding me." Shane Mercer was not a titan of finance. He was not a dangerous older man with inherited money and quiet power. He was one of those glossy Chicago finance-adjacent parasites who orbit real firms without ever being able to belong to them. 31 maybe. White teeth, loud suits, a video podcast about wealth strategy, a rotating backdrop of rented conference spaces and leased sports cars. The type of man who posted clips of himself, saying the word capital like it was cologne. I had seen him once before at a commercial development mixer. He had cornered a lender near the Shrimp Tower and spent 10 minutes loudly explaining markets to a room full of people who already worked in them. My wife, a disciplined stockbroker at a respected firm, had not only been cheating. She had been cheating with that. That was the first surprise that actually hurt my pride. Not because he was better, because he was embarrassing. If she had betrayed me with some serious, private man who moved cleanly through big rooms, it would still have destroyed the marriage. But at least it would have been comprehensible. Shane Mercer was a clown in expensive loafers. A man whose entire public identity was one bad quarter away from a federal inquiry and a motivational retreat in Scottsdale. That changed the flavor of the pain. It stopped feeling tragic. It started feeling insulting. Over the next 4 days, I treated my life like due diligence. I downloaded everything. I pulled household statements, calendar records, parking invoices, and the detailed reimbursement data Beatrice had once proudly shown me how to read, because she liked that I admired how organized she was. She had been smart enough to cover most of it, just not smart enough to remember that quiet men become forensic when they are forced to. The pattern was beautiful in its ugliness. Shane's media company had received 3 marketing consulting, payments from Beatrice's personal business development fund. The car service lined up with evenings when she told me she was having late compliance reviews. The hotel tabs aligned with the exact nights she came home slightly warmer than usual, as though guilt had briefly made her generous. Then I found the object that made it feel physical. At the bottom of her work tote, under two prospectuses and a makeup pouch, there was a black velvet key sleeve with a brass medallion stamped with the crest of the Astor Club. Members only. Old Chicago. Quiet money trying not to look like money. Inside the sleeve was a valet claim stub. On the back in silver marker someone had written S, penthouse elevator only. I stood there holding it between two fingers like it might contaminate me. Not because it was sexually explicit. There was nothing graphic about it. That was the insult. Affairs are usually built out of practical debris. Elevator notes, parking tickets, payment trails. The body becomes real later. The logistics tell on it first. I put the key sleeve back exactly where I found it. Then I called an attorney. Her name was Dana Kessler. Mid-40s. No nonsense. River North office with glass walls, and exactly one framed diploma displayed where clients could see it without being comforted by it. She listened for 20 minutes, said very little, and asked the only question that mattered. Do you want to save the marriage or secure the exit? Secure the exit, I said. That answer came too easily. It startled me more than anything else had. Maybe because some part of me had already known the difference between repairable betrayal and structural rot. It was not only that Beatrice was sleeping with another man. It was that she had moved money around me. She had stepped into the future I was building and started using it as private scaffolding. Dana gave me a list. Freeze what I could legally freeze. Separate what I could legally separate. Do not confront until paper outran performance. Do not let a charming person regain ground through emotion while documents are still loose. That line stayed with me. A charming person. That was Beatrice's actual religion. Not love, not money, not ambition. Charm. She believed charm could reopen any door that fact had closed. She believed tone was strategy. She believed if she could get a room back under her emotional management, she could survive almost anything. I spent the next week making sure the room would never be hers again. I opened a new account. I moved commissions not already committed. I copied every record touching the reserve account. I documented the unauthorized trade, the internal notes, the transfer chain, the payment flow to Shane Mercer's company, the reimbursement overlaps, and the club charges. Dana's office turned it into a neat blue packet that felt, in my hand, like the condensed weight of disrespect. Meanwhile at home, Beatrice was almost tender. That was the cruelest part. She brought me espresso on Saturday morning. She straightened my tie before a listing brunch. She asked whether we should finally take the long weekend in Michigan we had talked about for 2 years. One night she stood in the kitchen barefoot, eating cherries over the sink, and asked, "Do you ever think we got lucky?" I looked at her and realized I no longer knew whether she was asking as my wife or as a woman privately trying to keep 2 lives above water. "Not the way I used to," I said. She laughed lightly, as if I were being ironic, and went upstairs. The confrontation happened at a work-adjacent social event, exactly the way Dana said it should. Not in our home, where memory could muddy it, and not in a full public blast, where noise could help Beatrice turn herself into a victim. The Chicago Commercial Alliance held a late spring networking reception every year at an architecture gallery on the river. Real estate brokers, lenders, designers, finance people, development attorneys. Exactly the kind of room where careers and egos drank under soft lighting and called it community. Beatrice was already planning to attend because her firm had clients there. I was going because half my pipeline for the summer would be in the building. And Shane Mercer, unbelievably, was also on the guest list as a moderator for a next-generation capital storytelling panel, which was so absurd I almost respected the shamelessness of it. Beatrice wore navy silk and diamonds, so understated they screamed money louder than larger ones ever could. Shane wore a pale suit and a watch big enough to measure insecurity in nautical miles. I let the room breathe for 40 minutes. I watched them, That was enough. He never touched her in a way the room could use. He did not need to. The familiarity was logistical. She knew before he reached the bar what he would order. He angled his body toward her even when other people spoke. Once, when she laughed, his eyes dropped to her mouth with the lazy confidence of a man who thought the real story was happening somewhere nobody else could read. Quiet men get underestimated in rooms like that. Everyone assumes if you are not the loudest person present, you are the least informed. Around 8:15, I walked to Beatrice's side and said, "I need you in the coat room corridor for 2 minutes." She looked at me, read something in my face, and for the first time in weeks I saw real caution. In the middle of this? Yes. We stepped into the corridor that ran behind the main hall, lined with coat racks, concrete columns, and framed site plans of buildings rich men wanted attached to their names. Through the open edge of the gallery, you could still hear the room. Laughter, glassware, the soft amplified voice of somebody introducing the next panel. I handed her the blue packet. She looked down, then back at me. "What is this?" That is the point where charm stops being useful. The blood left her face so fast it was almost clinical. She opened the packet. First the account statement, then the trade confirmation, then the internal order note, then the transfer sequence, then the payments to Granite Harbor Media, then the valet charge pattern, then the Astor Club slip, then the draft separation filing Dana had prepared. Her breathing changed. "Fred, read," she flipped faster. "This is not what it looks like." I leaned one shoulder against the concrete column and watched my marriage become paperwork. "Don't do that," I said. "That line only works if the documents are weak." She looked up, eyes bright now, but not with clean remorse. With panic, control sliding. The room beyond us still existed. People she knew were 20 feet away. Colleagues, clients, men whose respect she had spent years pricing and packaging. "It was a temporary misallocation," she said. "The trade was a mistake. The transfers were short-term corrections, and Shane Mercer, the name, did it." That was the moment the story stopped being finance and became humiliation. Her shoulders dropped the slightest inch. I went on before she could rebuild. "You moved money through my reserve account. You paid his company. You covered his car service. You used our life like a private line of credit for a man the serious part of this city laughs at after he leaves the room. Please lower your voice," she whispered. My voice was almost gentle. "I am the only person here giving you privacy." She looked past me toward the gallery, as if the architecture itself might save her. "It's not that simple. It actually is." I tapped the packet. "This is the trade you entered in the wrong account. These are the reimbursements. These are the transfers. This is the club access. This is the separation filing. The only complicated part left is whether you want to humiliate yourself further by lying after you've read your own handwriting on the order notes." Tears gathered instantly. Beatrice could cry on command if she needed to. But this was different. This had timing, yes, but it also had fear under it. "How long?" I asked. She closed the packet. "Fred, how long?" There was a pause long enough to expose the truth even before she said it. 8 months, I nodded once. Not because I was calm. Because numbers deserved acknowledgement. "Did you love him?" That question surprised her. Maybe because I asked it without any heat. Maybe because the answer embarrassed her more than the affair itself. "It wasn't about that." I almost smiled. "That's convenient." She pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth. "He was having cash problems. It started as advice. Then he was going to pay it back. Then I held up a hand. I do not need the biography of a man who rents credibility." That landed hard enough to make her flinch. In the gallery, applause broke out for something trivial. The timing was so perfect it almost felt scripted. A room full of polished professionals clapping for ambition, while my wife stood in a corridor learning that control was gone. "You already filed," she said quietly, seeing the draft pages again. "My attorney already has everything." Her eyes moved over my face, trying to find an angle. Sympathy, anger, shame, anything she could use to re-enter the room emotionally. "Fred, please, do not make a permanent decision because of one stupid, terrible season." That was Beatrice in one sentence. Not confession, not truth, branding, a season. something temporary and weather-like, something she hoped could be narrated smaller than it was. I stepped closer just once. You did not have an affair because you were confused, I said. You had an affair because you thought you could afford one. Her face broke then. Not prettily. For the first time all night, she looked exactly like what she was. A woman who had mistaken a quiet husband for a safe margin. I can fix this, she said. No, I said. You can explain it. Fixing ended when you started billing our future to your secret. That was the line. That was the moment. She knew it. I knew it. There are sentences after which a marriage may continue in paperwork, but not in spirit. That was ours. And then the one surprise I had not planned arrived on its own. Shane Mercer rounded the corner. Of course he did. He was looking for her with that smooth, social confidence of a man who thinks all hallways open for him. He took in the packet in her hands, my face, her tears, and for one beautiful second his expression emptied completely. Everything all right? He asked, which was exactly the kind of useless sentence a useless man reaches for when the cost of his own behavior finally appears with decent shoes on. Beatrice turned away from him. Not toward me. Away from him. Interesting. I looked at Shane and understood all at once that the affairs center had never really been him. Men like him are props with cheekbones. The real center had been Beatrice's vanity, the thrill of financing risk, the narcotic of being needed by someone noisier and more fragile than she was. Shane was just the costume the lie wore. No, I said to him. But the accounting is finished. He said nothing. He did not posture. He did not defend her. He did not claim her. The room had become too real for that. Social embarrassment has a smell to it, and cowards pick it up first. Beatrice saw it too. That may have been the ugliest cut of the night. Not that I knew, but that the man she had spent 8 months funding could not even stand in the corridor with her once truth arrived. I took the packet gently from her hands, removed the final page set she needed, and gave those back. Your copy, I said. She stared at them like they were written in a language she had once spoken fluently and suddenly lost. Then I stepped around both of them and went back into the gallery. I did not announce anything. I did not torch the room. I shook 2 hands, told a lender I would call him Monday, thanked the host, picked up my coat, and left by the river entrance while the city gleamed black and silver outside like money under cold water. Beatrice called 11 times that night. I answered none of them. Her texts came in waves. Please let me explain. You do not understand how it got this far. It wasn't about the money. Please don't ruin my career. Please don't make this public. That last one interested me. Not because I intended revenge. I did not. I have always believed revenge is what people choose when they cannot bear the cleaner work of ending something fully. But it told me what she feared most. Not losing me. Not even losing the marriage. Losing control of the narrative in the rooms where her name still had market value. The legal process was ugly in the tasteful way moneyed divorces often are. No screaming. No flying dishes. Just paper, posture, and adults in good jackets saying vicious things with professional nouns. Dana earned every dollar. The unauthorized use of my reserve account mattered. The documented transfers mattered more. Beatrice's attorney tried to dress it as household fluidity. Dana called it what it was, deceptive commingling in service of concealed personal conduct. That phrase bought me peace. Shane disappeared almost immediately from anything serious. His panel clips got mocked in smaller circles. Whatever arrangement he had with Beatrice died the second it had to stand in daylight without private financing. Last I heard, he was doing sponsored content for a tax software brand and trying to reinvent himself as a capital access strategist, which is the sort of title men invent when old lies no longer fit. Beatrice, to her credit or maybe just to her instinct for damage control, never tried to publicly paint me as cruel. She knew the documents would not allow it. She tried twice to meet in person. I declined twice. She wrote one long email about pressure, loneliness, admiration, and how easy it had been to feel seen by someone who needed her. I read it once. Then I deleted it. Quiet men are often accused of emotional distance by the very people who mistake steadiness for an invitation to cheat. What I learned after the divorce was that distance can also be discipline. It can be the space necessary to hear yourself clearly again. I rented a place in Old Town for a year and did something I had not done in a long time. I lived without performing the life. No hostess candles. No obligatory weekends with people I did not enjoy. No joint calendar full of polished events designed to reassure other adults that we were thriving. I worked. I closed 3 very good deals. I ran by the lake in the morning. I cooked simple food. I bought a chair I liked without asking whether it fit a shared aesthetic. Little things, but little things are how self-respect returns. Not in speeches, but in the absence of permission-seeking. Before I tell you how this ended, subscribe to Reddit Ride for more stories where the truth does not need to shout to take a life apart. About 14 months later, I bought a 2-flat in Lincoln Park that needed more vision than romance, which by then suited me perfectly. I renovated the owner's unit slowly. Good walnut floors, better light, clean lines, nothing performative. The kind of place a grown man builds when he finally understands that peace is not a mood. It is a design choice. And somewhere in the middle of that rebuild, the story stopped being about Beatrice. That was the real ending. Not the filings, not the corridor, not Shane Mercer shrinking in his rented suit under gallery lighting. The real ending was the day I looked at the old trade confirmation Dana had told me to keep and felt nothing except gratitude for the mistake. If Beatrice had not hit the wrong account, she might have gone on underestimating me for years. She might have kept financing noise with my silence. She might have mistaken my steadiness for endless access. Instead, she made one reckless move in the only place I never ignore. The numbers. People like Beatrice think quiet men do not notice until it is too late. The truth is we often notice first. We just refuse to move until the evidence can stand up without us. And once it can, we do not slam doors. We change the locks in our own minds and walk forward like adults,